The first time Marcus Calder saw the boy, he stopped breathing. Not because the hospital was crowded. Not because rain was beating so hard against the tall glass windows that the city outside looked like it was dissolving. Not even because his father was somewhere behind a set of double doors, fighting for his life. Marcus stopped because the boy looked like him. Not a little. Not in the vague way strangers sometimes say children resemble someone they want to flatter. The boy looked like a photograph Marcus had once seen of himself at 10 years old. Same dark eyes. Same narrow face. Same little crease between the brows, as if the child had already learned how to hold fear without letting it spill. He sat near the pediatric hematology wing, one hand wrapped around a paper cup, the other resting over the white hospital bracelet on his wrist. He was thin, composed, too quiet for a child sitting alone in a hospital corridor during a storm. A nurse stepped out from the nearby station and said gently, "Theo Wrenfield? Dr. Sato is ready for you." Theo Wrenfield. Marcus felt the name go through him. Wrenfield. He had not spoken that name in years. He had tried not to think it, but that night, the name was everywhere. On the hospital wall, on the glass doors, on the badge of every doctor moving through the corridor. Wrenfield Heart and Blood Institute. The best place in the country for rare blood disorders. The place the emergency physician had insisted Marcus's father had to be transferred to if he had any chance of surviving the night. Edwin Calder had collapsed less than an hour earlier. One moment, he had been standing in his private library, insisting he was fine. The next, he had gripped the edge of his desk, gone gray, and whispered that his chest felt wrong. The first hospital stabilized him, then immediately prepared a transfer. "There's a complication with his blood disorder," the doctor had said. "He needs a combined hematology and cardiac team." Marcus had asked where. The doctor had answered, "Wrenfield." And now Marcus stood in that hospital, rain dripping from his coat, watching a 10-year-old boy with his face walk toward a doctor in the pediatric hematology wing. Marcus turned toward the nurse station, his voice lower than he intended. "My father was brought in for a rare blood disorder. Is this whole wing hematology?" The nurse glanced only at Marcus, not at the boy's chart. "This side is pediatric hematology, sir. Some rare blood conditions can be inherited, so doctors often ask carefully about family history." Marcus looked back at the boy. Theo Wrenfield. 10 years old. His own childhood face. The nurse had not told him anything private. But somehow, she had given his fear a language. "Marcus." His mother's voice cut through the corridor. Marjorie Calder stood behind him, elegant even in panic, her pearls sitting perfectly at her throat. She looked toward the pediatric wing, then back at him with irritation. "Your father is the one dying tonight. Stop staring." Marcus forced himself to turn away. A few minutes later, inside a private consultation room, a hematologist explained Edwin's condition to the family. Edwin had a rare inherited blood disorder, one that affected clotting stability, oxygen transport, inflammation, and in severe cases, the heart. Wrenfield had been tracking and treating conditions like his for years. The doctor did not show another patient's name. He did not reveal another child's file. "This condition is rare," the doctor said. "It can be inherited, so family history matters in cases like your father's." Marcus barely heard the rest. Through the glass wall, he could still see the boy. Theo Wrenfield. 10 years old. His own childhood face staring back at him from across the corridor. A photograph could be dismissed. A resemblance could be denied. But the name, the age, the pediatric hematology wing, Edwin's rare blood disorder, and the woman Marcus knew had once carried a child he refused to wait for. Those things left him with nowhere to hide. Then the door opened. A woman stepped into the room in a black tailored suit, her hair pinned low, her hospital badge clipped cleanly to her lapel. Isabel Wrenfield. Not Isabel Calder. Not the young wife Marcus had accused 10 years earlier. Not the woman he had left standing in the rain with his child inside her. Isabel Wrenfield, chairwoman of Wrenfield Medical Group, the woman who ran the hospital now, trying to save his father. For a moment, no one spoke. Marjorie stiffened. Marcus's mouth went dry. Isabel looked at the doctor first, then at Edwin's chart, then at Marcus. Her expression did not change. Outside the glass wall, the boy appeared again, walking slowly beside the nurse. When he saw Isabel, his whole face softened. "Mom," the boy said. Marcus gripped the edge of the table. "Isabel," he whispered. "Is he?" She did not let him finish. Her voice was quiet. "He is the child you refused to wait for." The words did not land like a confession. They landed like a door closing. Marcus looked from Isabel to the boy. 10 years old. Wrenfield. Edwin's blood disorder. His own face. And in that moment, Marcus knew. The cruelest part was not that he had no proof. The cruelest part was that he had lost the right to ask for it. If you have ever watched someone destroy a family because they were too ashamed to tell the truth, stay with me. Because what Marcus Calder discovered that night was not just who the boy was, it was who Marcus had been. 10 years earlier, Isabel Wrenfield did not want to be a Wrenfield. Not because she hated her family. She loved her father in the difficult way daughters sometimes love men who build empires and call them protection. Lionel Wrenfield was not cruel. He was not cold, exactly. But he had the kind of presence that made a room straighten itself before he entered. Wrenfield Medical Group was not just a hospital chain. It was a family legacy built from surgery, research, pediatric units, cardiac wings, blood disorder programs, and quiet money behind marble walls. Isabel grew up inside that legacy. By 17, she understood two things clearly. Everyone expected her to become a doctor, and no one had ever asked whether she wanted to. She did not. She did not want a white coat. She did not want a life where every hallway already knew her last name. She loved business. Strategy. Branding. Negotiation. The hidden architecture behind how institutions survived. Lionel did not reject that. He simply wanted her to bring those instincts back into Wrenfield. Isabel wanted the opposite. She wanted to prove that she could build a life without the family name opening every door before she touched the handle. So after college, she moved into a small apartment across town, took a consulting job under the name Isabel Lane, and refused every offer from her father to come home. That was where she met Marcus Calder. He was not poor. The Calders were polished, comfortable, socially known. His mother belonged to charity committees that photographed beautifully. His father sat on boards where men still shook hands before betraying one another. But the Calders were not Wrenfields. And Marcus did not know Isabel was one. That was the first thing she loved about him. He did not lower his voice around her last name. He did not ask which wing her grandfather had endowed. He met her in a conference room over a failing clinic rebrand, listened to her present a plan no one else had taken seriously, and said afterward, "You were the only person in there who understood the problem." Isabel laughed. "You mean the budget?" "No," Marcus said. "The fear. Everyone else kept trying to fix numbers. You noticed the staff were afraid of being replaced." She looked at him then. Really looked. Marcus was handsome in a controlled way. Dark hair, careful posture, expensive watch, guarded smile. But when he forgot to perform, there was softness in him. He brought her coffee during late nights. He walked her to her car when the office parking lot emptied. He asked about her ideas, not her family. When Isabel told him she hated being managed, he said, "Then don't let anyone manage you." It was easy to mistake that for courage. They fell in love quickly. Or at least, Isabel did. Marcus loved her too, but his love had locked rooms. Certain questions made him smile too fast. Certain jokes about children made his face close. Once, when a coworker teased him about becoming a father someday, Marcus left the table and did not return for 15 minutes. Isabel noticed. She did not press. She thought marriage would open the doors time had not. That was one of the mistakes people make when they are loved enough to feel safe, but not known enough to be protected. When Marcus proposed, it was simple. No cameras, no family estate, no ring chosen by his mother. Just the two of them under a half-broken streetlight after dinner, rain threatening above the city. "I don't need the big version of life," he told her. "I just need the real one." Isabel believed him. She said yes. She told Lionel after the civil ceremony. He did not shout. That made it worse. He stood in the doorway of his study, one hand resting on the back of a leather chair, and looked at his daughter as if trying to understand when exactly she had become someone who could marry a man without calling her father first. "Do you love him?" he asked. "Yes. Does he know who you are?" Isabel hesitated. "He knows me. That is not what I asked. He doesn't need the Wrenfield part." Lionel's jaw tightened. Everyone needs the truth before they can be trusted with your future. Isabel felt her old anger rise. "You mean everyone needs your approval?" "No," Lionel said. "I mean storms reveal architecture. Love is not enough if the person beside you was built without walls." She hated the sentence. She hated how it sounded like wisdom wrapped in control. So she said something she would later regret. "I'm not one of your hospitals, Dad. You don't get to inspect me before I open." Lionel flinched, but only slightly. Then he nodded. If you walk away from this family, he said, make sure the person you choose knows how to stand beside you when storms come. Isabel left angry. She told herself he was trying to frighten her. She told herself Marcus was different. For nearly a year, she was almost right. Their apartment was small but warm. They bought mismatched plates. They argued over curtains. They burned dinner twice and laughed both times. Marcus came home tired but kind. Isabel built her consulting career project by project. She liked being Mrs. Calder in a place where no one cared. His mother, Marjorie Calder, never fully warmed to her. Marjorie was elegant, pale, and sharp in the way some wealthy women become when they mistake judgment for taste. She never said Isabel was beneath them. That would have been too crude. She said things like, your background is refreshingly unclear, and Marcus has always been generous with strays, then smiled as if the cruelty had been accidental. Isabel chose peace. Marcus chose avoidance. She doesn't mean it that way, he would say. But she did. And Isabel knew. What Isabel did not know was that Marjorie was not the only secret inside the Calder family. Marcus had one too. Years before meeting Isabel, after months of private pain and quiet tests, a doctor had told him fatherhood would be difficult. Not impossible, not forbidden, not erased from life entirely. Difficult, extremely unlikely, without intervention. Marcus heard only one word: defective. He never told Isabel. He never gave her the chance to love him around the wound. Instead, he hid it where shame hides best, beneath pride. And shame, when left alone long enough, does not stay quiet. It waits for someone innocent to punish. Isabel found out she was pregnant on a Tuesday morning. It was raining. She remembered that later because rain seemed to mark every doorway in her life. She had been feeling tired for weeks, but she blamed long hours. She was working on a clinic expansion strategy, building a reputation under a name that was not quite hers, proving to an invisible version of her father that she could survive without the weight of Wrenfield behind her. Then the smell of Marcus's coffee made her nauseous. She bought the test on her lunch break, half embarrassed, half hopeful, telling herself not to imagine anything yet. But when the lines appeared, clear and undeniable, Isabel sat on the bathroom floor and pressed one hand over her mouth. A baby. For several minutes, she did not move. Then she laughed. Not loudly. Just one soft, trembling sound that belonged to a version of her she had not met before. She imagined telling Marcus. She imagined him staring at the test, stunned, then smiling, maybe crying, maybe lifting her off the floor, spinning her once like people in movies do when happiness is too large for ordinary gestures. She imagined calling Lionel and saying, "You're going to be a grandfather," and hearing, beneath his controlled voice, the crack in him. She imagined storms becoming weather instead of warnings. That evening, she cooked Marcus's favorite dinner. It turned out badly. She oversalted the sauce and forgot the bread in the oven. It didn't matter. When Marcus came home, he looked tired. His tie was loose, his hair damp from the rain. "You're smiling," he said. "I have something to show you." She handed him the envelope from her doctor first, then the test. Marcus looked down. For 1 second, there was no expression on his face. Then every bit of color drained from it. Isabel's smile faltered. "Marcus?" He looked at her as if she had become a stranger while standing 3 feet away. "How long have you known?" The question was wrong. Not, "Are you serious?" Not, "We're having a baby?" Not her name spoken with wonder. Just suspicion. "I found out this morning," she said carefully. "I saw Dr. Patel to confirm." Marcus set the paper on the table as if it burned him. "No." Isabel blinked. "What?" "No. Marcus, I'm pregnant." His jaw tightened. "That baby can't be mine." The room went silent. Isabel heard the rain more clearly then. Thin lines of water hitting glass. A car passing outside. Her own pulse in her ears. "What did you just say?" Marcus turned away, dragging a hand over his face. "I said it can't be mine." "Why would you say that?" He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Act like you don't know what this means." Isabel stared at him. "I don't know what this means because you're not making sense." Marcus looked at her then, and for the first time she saw not anger, but humiliation, naked, violent, terrified. "I can't have children," he said. The words fell between them. Isabel did not understand at first. "You... what?" "I was tested years ago. You never told me. I didn't think I had to." "You didn't think you had to tell your wife you believed you couldn't have children?" His face hardened, Because shame almost always reaches for cruelty when tenderness gets too close. Apparently it didn't matter. Isabel stepped back. There it was. The accusation before the evidence. The verdict before the trial. Her pregnancy, the thing she had carried into the room like light, became a weapon pointed at her. "Marcus," she said slowly, "listen to me. Whatever you were told, it may not mean impossible. We can talk to a doctor. We can test after the baby is born. We can do this properly." His eyes flashed. "So, you have your defense ready." "My defense?" "You knew. I knew nothing. You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to remember who I am." "I thought I did." The sentence hit harder than shouting. The next hour blurred. Marcus called his mother. Isabel did not know why. A husband in pain might call for help. A husband in fear might call for guidance. But Marcus called Marjorie. And Marjorie came like someone who had been waiting for the house to catch fire. She arrived in pearls and a cream coat, her mouth already arranged into pity. "Oh, Marcus," she said, touching his face as if Isabel had physically wounded him. "My poor boy." Isabel stood in the middle of the living room, one hand over her stomach. Marjorie looked at her then, not with surprise, with satisfaction. "So this is what you brought into my son's home." Isabel's voice shook. "I brought his child." Marjorie's eyes went cold. "A man who knows he cannot father a child does not need a courtroom to recognize betrayal." "Your son was told he had low fertility," Isabel said. "That is not the same as impossible." Marcus flinched. Marjorie saw it and struck deeper. "Do not use medical language to make sin sound sophisticated." Isabel turned to Marcus. "Say something." He looked at the floor. Marcus. "Nothing." That was the moment Isabel understood her father's warning. Storms reveal architecture. And Marcus had no walls. Marjorie called the family attorney the next morning. By noon, separation papers were being discussed. By evening, Isabel was told it would be cleaner if she left before the situation became public. "The situation," she repeated. Marjorie's smile was thin. "Yes, that is the kindest word available." Marcus stood near the fireplace, pale and silent. Isabel looked at him, searching for the man who had once told her he wanted the real version of life. But the real version had arrived. And he had chosen the performance. "I'll take a legal test after the baby is born," Isabel said. "Not because I owe you proof, but because this child deserves the truth." Marcus finally looked up. "If you had any truth, you wouldn't need time." Isabel felt something inside her go still. She picked up the papers, tore them once, then placed them on the table. "I won't sign anything tonight." Marjorie's expression sharpened. "You are in no position to be difficult." Isabel almost laughed. They had no idea who she was. Not really. But in that moment, she had no energy left to use her name as a weapon. She had spent so long running from Wrenfield that calling it now felt like crawling back through a door she had slammed herself. So she packed one suitcase. Marcus watched. When she reached the door, rain was pouring beyond the porch. She turned one last time. "One day," she said, "you will realize you didn't need proof to abandon me. You only needed permission." Marcus said nothing. Marjorie stood behind him. Isabel stepped into the rain with his child inside her. No one followed. And if you believe a woman should never be punished for a wound a man was too ashamed to reveal, write not her shame in the comments. Because what happened next was not a fall. It was the beginning of the woman Marcus would one day have to face. Isabel stood outside the Wrenfield estate just after midnight. The gates looked taller than she remembered. Rain ran down her hair, her coat, the handle of the small suitcase beside her. Her shoes were ruined. Her hands were shaking, though she did not know if it was from cold or humiliation. For years, she had imagined returning to this house victorious. A woman who had built her own company. A woman who had proved Lionel wrong. A woman who could stand at the gate and say, "I left, and I became exactly who I wanted to be." Instead, she came back pregnant, discarded, and almost too ashamed to press the call button. The guard recognized her. Of course he did. No one truly stopped being a Wrenfield on Wrenfield property. Within minutes, the front door opened. Lionel stood there, in a dark robe, silver hair uncombed, expression unreadable. He looked at the suitcase first, then her stomach, then her face. Isabel prepared herself for the sentence. "I told you so." She deserved it. She had married without telling him. She had hidden her name from her husband. She had mistaken independence for isolation and pride for freedom. Lionel said nothing. He simply opened the door wider. "Come inside." That was when Isabel broke. not because he forgave her, because he did not make her beg before offering shelter. She stepped inside and sobbed once, hard, like something torn out of her. Lionel removed his robe and placed it over her shoulders. "You're freezing." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For leaving. For lying. For thinking you were trying to own my life. For marrying him without telling you. For coming back like this." Lionel studied her for a long moment. "You were allowed to choose love," he said. "But love was not allowed to leave you homeless." She covered her face. He let her cry. Later, in the kitchen, he made tea badly. Lionel Wrenfield could negotiate hospital acquisitions across 3 countries, but he could not steep chamomile without making it bitter. Isabel drank it anyway. "He thinks the baby isn't his," she said. Lionel's hand tightened around his cup. "Is it?" She looked at him. The question hurt, but not because it was cruel. It was direct. Lionel had always respected facts enough to ask for them plainly. "Yes." "Then he is a fool. No lecture?" "I have several," Lionel said. "But not tonight." She almost smiled through tears. Then he leaned forward. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Do you want to go back to him?" "No." The answer came faster than she expected. Lionel nodded once. "Good, Dad. Any man can be frightened. Fear is human. But he let his fear throw you into the rain. That is not confusion. That is character." Isabel looked down at her hands. "I don't want to come back and be useless." "Then don't. I'm not going to medical school." "I didn't ask you to." "I don't want a white coat." "You never did." She looked up. Lionel's expression softened slightly. "This family does not need another doctor with our name on a wall," he said. "It needs someone who understands what power is for." The next morning, he gave her a suite in the East Wing and a schedule. Isabel stared at it. Hospital finance, compliance law, research ethics, patient privacy, foundation oversight, crisis management, Lionel said. Isabel stared at the schedule. "You're punishing me. I'm preparing you." "For what?" "For the day you stop mistaking escape for freedom." So Isabel began. She sat in boardrooms where men underestimated her, learned how money could save or abandon patients, and discovered that a hospital was not built from medicine alone, but from decisions nobody applauded when they were made correctly. Some days she cried in the restroom. Some days she fell asleep over budget reports. Some days she hated Lionel for being right. But slowly, something changed. She began to see Wrenfield not as a cage, but as an instrument. A flawed one. A powerful one. A dangerous one in the wrong hands. A protective one in the right hands. When she walked through the pediatric wing, she saw parents sleeping in chairs with one hand on a child's blanket. When she visited the blood disorders unit, she saw families who had spent years searching for answers. When she sat with the foundation board, she saw how one fund could pay for treatment a child's mother had stopped believing was possible. Power, Isabel learned, was not luxury. Power was a wall built in time. One evening, when she was 7 months pregnant, Lionel found her in the old research library with 3 folders open in front of her. "You look terrible." "I feel terrible." "Good. That means you're learning." She glared at him. He almost smiled. Then he sat across from her. "Pain can break you," he said. "Or it can teach you exactly where the walls should have been." Isabel touched her stomach. The baby moved. For the first time since the night Marcus threw her out, she did not feel like a woman waiting to be rescued. She felt unfinished. And unfinished meant still becoming. Theo was born on a cold morning after a storm. Lionel stood outside the delivery room for 7 hours and pretended not to be terrified. When the nurse finally placed the baby in Isabel's arms, she looked down at his tiny face, his closed fists, his dark hair, and felt the world rearrange itself around one truth. No one would ever make this child feel like a scandal. A nurse asked for the father's name. Isabel stared at the form. There was a time when she had imagined Marcus standing beside her, exhausted and awed, writing his name with shaking hands. Instead, there was only the steady beep of machines and Lionel standing at the door with his eyes bright. "Leave it blank," Isabel said. The nurse hesitated. Isabel looked up. "Leave it blank." And when the nurse asked for the baby's surname, Isabel did not hesitate. "Wrenfield." She gave him her name. Not because she wanted to erase Marcus, but because Marcus had erased himself before the boy was born. Lionel held his grandson that afternoon. The great Lionel Wrenfield, who intimidated ministers and surgeons and donors, looked down at the baby and cried without making a sound. "He is not a scandal," he said. "He is my grandson." For a while, That was enough. Then Theo began to bruise. Small marks at first, too many for a baby who barely moved, then fatigue, then unexplained fevers. Blood tests that came back wrong enough to worry the pediatrician, but not wrong enough to explain everything. Wrenfield hematology took over. Isabel learned new vocabulary with the kind of fear only mothers understand. Not as a businesswoman, not as a Wrenfield. As a woman sitting beside a crib, watching specialists speak gently because they knew gentleness could not soften the result. Theo had a rare inherited blood disorder. Manageable if monitored, dangerous if ignored. The condition affected clotting and oxygen stability, and in certain families, it carried cardiac risks later in life. The research team had seen only a handful of cases with that exact pattern. Isabel listened. She asked questions. She wrote everything down. Then one of the hematologists showed her the comparative lineage data. The pattern did not come from the Wrenfield side. It matched a documented family line in older records. Calder. More specifically, Edwin Calder had been treated for a related presentation years before. Isabel sat very still. The room seemed to narrow around her. Theo was Marcus's son. She had known it in her body, in her memory, in the calendar of her own life. But now the truth was written in a language Marcus's family could not easily dismiss. Blood. History. A condition that had traveled silently through generations and arrived in the child Marcus had called impossible. Lionel asked if she wanted to send the information to Marcus. Isabel sat beside Theo's crib that night, watching the baby sleep with a soft bandage on his arm. Finally, she said, "No." Lionel did not argue. But he asked, "Why?" "Because I won't take my son's diagnosis to a man who needed proof before he could protect us. And if he finds out one day?" Isabel looked at Theo. "Then he will know." She touched her son's tiny hand. "But knowing will not make him a father." Theo grew up inside the Wrenfield world. But Isabel made sure he did not grow up spoiled by it. He knew nurses by name before he knew board members. He knew which hallway had the vending machine that stole coins. He knew that his grandfather looked terrifying in meetings, but kept chocolate in the left drawer of his desk. He knew his mother could silence a room with one sentence and still sit on the floor at night building model airplanes badly because Theo loved them. He also knew about his blood. Not everything at once. Isabel refused to turn his childhood into a medical briefing, but she refused to lie to him too. When Theo was 5, she told him his blood needed extra watching, like a small engine that worked beautifully when cared for properly. When he was 7, he asked if he would die. Isabel's heart stopped. Then she sat beside him and said, "Not today, not because of this, and not without everyone in this family fighting like crazy first." Theo considered that. "Grandpa fights scary." "Yes. You fight quiet." Isabel smiled. "That's usually scarier." By the time Theo was 10, he understood monitoring, flare-ups, fatigue days, and the strange boredom of being a child in a hospital too often. He did not like pity. He hated when adults lowered their voices around him. He could spot fear in a room faster than most grown men could name it. Once, during a routine visit, he asked, "Did I get this from you?" Isabel looked up from the tablet in her lap. They were in the pediatric garden, under a glass roof while rain tapped above them. Theo sat cross-legged on the bench, serious as always. "No, sweetheart. From my dad?" Isabel had known the question would come. Still, it struck. She took a breath. "You got the condition from a family line that isn't mine." "So from him?" "Yes." Theo absorbed that. "Does he know?" "No." "Why not?" Isabel looked through the rain-streaked glass. "Because when I was carrying you, he decided he didn't believe you were his." Theo's face did not change much, but his fingers tightened around his sleeve. "Because of me?" "No." Isabel turned to him fully. "Never because of you." "Because of you?" "No." "Then why?" She chose the truth carefully. "Because he was afraid of something inside himself, and instead of telling the truth, he blamed me." Theo looked down. "Was he mean?" Isabel thought of Marcus in the doorway. Marjorie's voice. The rain. The suitcase. He was weak when it mattered. Theo nodded slowly. Then he asked, "Is weak the same as bad?" Isabel swallowed. "Not always. But weakness can still hurt people like badness does." He leaned against her. She put an arm around him. From that day on, Theo never asked to meet Marcus. That hurt Isabel in a way she did not admit. Not because she wanted Marcus back, but because every child deserves to ask about a father without needing to protect his mother from the answer. Across the city, Marcus Calder built a life that looked intact from the outside. He signed the divorce. He let his mother tell relatives that Isabel had betrayed him. He never corrected the story. At first, he told himself silence was dignity. Then he told himself silence was privacy. Eventually, he understood silence had simply become easier than confession. 2 years after the divorce, he married Lydia Crane, a woman Marjorie adored. Lydia was polished, composed, and kind in a formal way. She came from the right schools, the right circles, the right kind of family that did not make Marjorie ask questions about background. Marcus was gentle with her, respectful, absent. They tried for children because the Calders needed continuity, because Marjorie wanted grandchildren, because Marcus wanted to prove something to himself he had never had the courage to name. Years passed. No child came. This time, Lydia insisted on specialists. Marcus went through tests again. He sat in a quiet office with framed diplomas on the wall and listened to a reproductive endocrinologist say the sentence that would haunt him. Your fertility is extremely low, Mr. Calder, but it is not zero. Not zero. Marcus stared at the doctor. Years ago, I was told. I can't speak to what you heard then, the doctor said gently. But low probability is not impossibility. Low probability is not impossibility. For the rest of that day, Marcus moved through the world as if the air had thickened. He thought of Isabel standing in their living room, one hand over her stomach, saying, "Then test after the baby is born, properly." He thought of his own voice saying, "That baby can't be mine." He thought of rain. He thought of how easy it had been to let a diagnosis become a verdict. He went home and sat alone in the dark until Marjorie came in and switched on the lamp. What did they say? Marcus looked at his mother. For the first time, he saw, not comfort, but architecture. A whole life built around appearances, reinforced with denial. They said almost impossible is not impossible. Marjorie's expression changed only slightly. Doctors soften things. No, Marcus said. We hardened them. She looked away. That was answer enough. After that, Marcus began searching for Isabel in secret. At first, just her name. Then Wrenfield. Then Wrenfield Medical Group. He found article after article. Isabel rising through Wrenfield's leadership, expanding pediatric blood disorder funding, chairing ethics reform panels, then finally becoming chairwoman of Wrenfield Medical Group. In one photograph, she stood at a charity event beside Lionel, her posture straight, her expression calm. She looked different. Not older, exactly. More finished. More herself. Beside her stood a boy. Dark hair. Dark eyes. A solemn face. The caption read, Chairwoman Isabel Wrenfield, with her son, Theo. Marcus clicked away so fast he nearly dropped the laptop. For 3 days, he did not search again. Then he did. He found another photo. Theo laughing beside a therapy dog at a pediatric fundraiser. Another. Theo holding a small paper airplane. Another. Isabel kneeling beside him, one hand on his shoulder. Marcus zoomed in until the image blurred. He saw himself. Or he thought he did. But seeing was not the same as knowing. And Marcus had spent too long surviving by refusing to know. So he told himself, it was coincidence. Then he told himself it was better not to disturb them. Then he told himself Isabel would have come if the boy were his. Each excuse was thinner than the last. But cowardice does not need strong walls. Only enough delay to survive another day. Edwin Calder's collapse came during another storm. Marcus had gone to his father's house because Marjorie called twice and did not leave a message. That alone was unusual. Marjorie believed voicemail was for people without influence. When Marcus arrived, he found Edwin in the library, one hand pressed flat against the desk, breathing like each inhale had to be negotiated. His father had aged in the last decade, not gently. Edwin had always been a quiet man, broad-shouldered, thoughtful, with a sadness Marcus had mistaken for patience when he was younger. He had rarely challenged Marjorie, rarely contradicted her, rarely intervened when her sharpness became cruelty. Marcus used to admire that as peacekeeping. Now he wondered how much damage had worn the mask of peace. Dad? Edwin looked up. I'm all right. You're gray. I said I'm all right. Then he collapsed. The first hospital stabilized him, but quickly became tense. Edwin's rare blood disorder complicated everything. Clotting instability, cardiac strain, inflammation markers that made the attending physician frown. We recommend immediate transfer, the doctor told Marcus. To where? Wrenfield Heart and Blood Institute. Marcus did not move. The doctor continued, unaware of the name's history. They have the leading combined hematology cardiac program. If anyone can manage this, it's them. So Marcus signed. Marjorie arrived at the hospital wearing diamonds and panic disguised as irritation. "Why Wrenfield?" she demanded. "Because he may die anywhere else," Marcus said. That silenced her, for a while. At Wrenfield, everything moved with terrifying efficiency. Edwin was taken through double doors. Specialists arrived before Marcus finished the intake forms. "I want the director," Marjorie said. The nurse replied politely, "Your husband is being seen by the emergency team." "I want whoever is in charge." A voice behind them said, "That would be me." Marcus turned. Isabel stood at the end of the corridor. For a second, he saw the woman from 10 years ago. Wet hair, pale face, one hand over her stomach, waiting for him to become brave. Then the image vanished. This Isabel was composed in a black suit, no jewelry except a slim watch, her hospital badge visible. Isabel Wrenfield, chairwoman. Marcus's throat tightened. Marjorie recovered first. Isabel, Mrs. Calder. The formality was a blade wrapped in silk. Marjorie's mouth tightened. "I didn't realize you worked here." "I don't work here," Isabel said. "I run it." No one spoke. Isabel turned to Marcus. "Your father is being assessed. His condition is unstable, but he arrived within the window where intervention may help." "Is he going to survive?" "We are doing everything medically appropriate." It was not comfort. It was more reliable than comfort. Marcus stared at her, ashamed of how badly he wanted her to be cruel. Cruelty would have given him somewhere to put his guilt. But Isabel was professional, controlled, untouchable in a way that made him feel smaller than anger ever could. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once. Not forgiveness, not warmth, just acknowledgement. A doctor took Marcus and Marjorie into a consultation room to review Edwin's history. Isabel did not join them at first. The hematology team explained the old diagnosis, the acute complication, the experimental protocol now approved under Wrenfield's expanded program. Marcus tried to focus. But through the glass wall, he saw the pediatric wing across the corridor. Then Marcus saw him again. The boy from the photograph, Theo. He sat by the window under a gray blanket, reading a paperback too thick for most children his age. He looked thinner in person, more serious. The nurse said something. He smiled politely but not fully. Marcus stood without realizing it. "Mr. Calder?" the doctor asked. Marcus did not answer. Theo looked up. Their eyes met across the corridor. Something passed between them. Not recognition. Something more painful. A resemblance neither of them had asked for. Theo looked away first. The doctor cleared his throat and turned back to Edwin's report. "This condition is rare," he said. "It can be inherited, so family history matters in cases like your father's." No one had told Marcus anything about the boy, but for the first time, the pieces refused to stay separate. Across the corridor, Theo Wrenfield sat by the pediatric window with a book in his lap. The face, the age, the name, Edwin's blood disorder. A photograph could be dismissed, a resemblance could be denied, but this left him with nowhere to hide. Marcus barely recognized his own voice. The boy in the pediatric wing, Theo Wrenfield. The doctor stiffened. "I can't discuss another patient, Mr. Calder." Then the door opened. Isabel stepped in. Her eyes moved to the report, then to Marcus. She did not look surprised. That almost destroyed him. She had known he would know someday. Or perhaps she had simply stopped caring whether he did. Marcus's voice dropped. "Who is Theo?" Isabel stood very still. "My son." Marjorie inhaled sharply. Marcus gripped the back of a chair. "He has my father's disease?" Isabel's gaze did not waver. "No," she said. "He has his grandfather's disease." The room went silent. Outside, Theo turned a page. Inside, Marcus Calder's life split open. Marcus had imagined guilt before. In the abstract. In the softened ways people use when they want to believe they are still decent. He had imagined apologizing someday. Perhaps if he ever found the right words. Perhaps if Isabel gave him an opening. Perhaps if the past became less sharp with time. But guilt in the abstract was nothing like the truth standing 10 feet away in a hospital corridor, wearing a child's face. "He has his grandfather's disease," Isabel had said. "Not Edwin's, not the Calder family's. His grandfather's." The word did not ask permission. It placed Theo exactly where Marcus had refused to place him 10 years ago. In the family line. In the blood. In the truth. Marjorie found her voice first. "This is inappropriate," she said. "A private medical matter is being discussed without." Isabel turned to her. "You are correct. Which is why Dr. Sato will leave us now." The hematologist looked deeply relieved and exited. The door closed. Marcus could barely stand. Isabel. No. I didn't know. You knew enough. The words struck like a slap. I was told I couldn't have children. You were told it was unlikely. He closed his eyes. You don't know that. I know enough about medicine now to know the difference between unlikely and impossible. I also know enough about shame to recognize when a man uses it as a weapon. Marjorie stepped forward. My son was devastated. Isabel looked at her. So was I. But I was the only one carrying a child while being punished for it. Marjorie's lips thinned. You could have contacted us. Isabel's calm did not break. With what? My ultrasound? My son's diagnosis? A plea for your family to believe a child you had already called evidence of betrayal? Marcus whispered. He's mine. Isabel looked at him then. Not with surprise. Not with denial. With something worse. Pity. Marcus hated it because he deserved it. He was yours, she said, when I stood in your doorway with your child inside me. He flinched. You didn't want proof then. I was ashamed. Yes. I thought. You thought your wound gave you the right to wound me. Marcus stared at her. I need to know. You already know. The sentence opened beneath him. Because he did. He knew from Theo's face. From his age. From Isabel's silence. From Edwin's condition. From the way his father had looked at Theo through the glass earlier, eyes filling not with confusion but recognition. He knew. But knowledge, without permission, had nowhere to go. Let me test, Marcus said. Isabel's face closed. No. The word was quiet. Final. Marcus stepped toward her. Please. No. Isabel, if he's my son. She lifted a hand. Do not use that word as if it belongs to you. He stopped. My son? Father. The room seemed to shrink. You want a test because you think a result can do what you refuse to do, she said. Stand beside him. Stand beside me. Tell the truth before the world forced it from you. Marcus's throat worked. I need proof. Isabel's eyes sharpened. You knew enough to destroy us without proof, Marcus. Now you know enough to suffer without it. Marjorie gasped softly, as if offended by the elegance of the cruelty. But it was not cruelty. That was the unbearable part. It was proportion. Marcus had once used uncertainty as a blade. Now Isabel used certainty as a boundary. The door opened again before anyone could speak. An orderly wheeled Edwin in from the procedure bay. Pale but conscious, connected to monitors. A nurse explained that he was stable for now, but he would need observation. Edwin's eyes moved around the room. Then, through the glass wall, he saw Theo. The boy had left his chair and was standing near the nurse's station, holding his book against his chest. Edwin stared. His face changed. It was not shock exactly. It was grief, arriving late. Isabel, Edwin said weakly. She turned. He looked from Theo, to Marcus, to Marjorie. Then back to Isabel. How long? 10 years. Edwin closed his eyes. I should have stopped it. Marcus looked at his father. What? Edwin's voice was thin. That night. Your mother called me after Isabel left. I knew you were wrong to send her out. I knew you should wait. Test. Think. Apologize. Anything except what you did. Then why didn't you say anything? Marcus asked. Edwin opened his eyes. Because I have been a coward longer than you have. The sentence landed heavily. Marjorie stiffened. Edwin, you are unwell. I am honest, he said. For once. He looked at Marcus. You wanted proof because you were afraid of being made a fool. Marcus's eyes burned. I was. Edwin's mouth trembled. Then you became one anyway. No one spoke. Outside, Theo glanced toward the room again. This time, Edwin lifted one weak hand to the glass. Theo did not wave back. He simply looked at the old man with the solemn curiosity of a child who had spent too much time in hospitals to be afraid of illness, but not enough time in the world to understand inheritance. Marjorie moved toward the glass. My God, she whispered. He really is. Isabel stepped in front of her. No. Marjorie blinked. Isabel, he is blood. The word cracked the room open. Isabel's voice became colder than Marcus had ever heard it. You do not get to call him blood after spending 10 years calling him shame. Marjorie recoiled. I never. You built the first lie around him before he had lungs strong enough to cry. He is a Calder. No, Isabel said. He is Theo Wrenfield. The name he carried when your family cared nothing for him. Marjorie's face flushed. You cannot erase lineage. I didn't erase it. I survived without it. Marcus looked at Isabel then, really looked. For 10 years, he had imagined her life in fragments, angry, lonely, perhaps bitter, perhaps waiting somewhere for his apology to matter. He had never imagined this. Isabel was not waiting. Theo was not incomplete. Wrenfield had not hidden them in shame. It had built around them like stone. And Marcus understood, with a pain so clean it felt surgical, that the truth had not come back to give him a son. It had come back to show him the shape of what he had lost. Edwin survived the night. Barely. The Wrenfield team controlled the immediate complication, stabilized his cardiac strain, and moved him to a monitored suite before dawn. Marjorie sat beside his bed, unnaturally quiet. Edwin slept under the soft rhythm of machines, his face hollow with exhaustion and regret. Marcus did not sleep. He stood for nearly an hour in the corridor outside pediatric hematology, watching nurses change shifts, watching the city pale beyond the windows, watching the rain become mist. Theo's appointment had ended sometime before sunrise. He came out with Isabel beside him, a small backpack over one shoulder, moving slowly but proudly, the way children do when they do not want adults to notice they are tired. Marcus stepped forward, then stopped. He had no right to step too quickly. Theo noticed him. Isabel's hand settled lightly on her son's shoulder. Not possessive. Protective. Marcus looked at her. "Can I speak with you?" "Not here." She had an assistant take Theo to the family lounge with a nurse he clearly knew well. Theo went without complaint, but he looked back once. Marcus felt that look like a sentence. Isabel led him to a private consultation room overlooking the rain-dark garden. No family portraits. No soft lighting. Just a table, 2 chairs, and glass. The kind of room where people heard life-changing things and were expected not to collapse. Marcus stood because sitting felt like pretending this was a meeting. "I know he's mine," he said. Isabel did not answer. Her silence was worse than denial. "Isabel." "Still nothing. Please say something." "What do you want me to say?" "That I'm right. You are not entitled to my confirmation." The sentence made him flinch. "I'm not trying to hurt you." "You don't have to try anymore. The damage is historical." He looked down. "I want to prove it." "For whom?" He looked up. "For Theo." "No. For myself then. For the truth." Isabel tilted her head slightly. "The truth is already here. I need something official." "There it is." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Marcus heard himself, and hated the sound of it. Official. As if what mattered was not the boy's life, but Marcus's access to it. "I don't mean." "Yes, you do," Isabel said. "You want a document. You want a result. You want the kind of paper that lets you walk into a room and say, 'My son,' without having to explain the rain." His face twisted. "That's not fair. Neither was being thrown out while pregnant because your shame needed a target." "I know." "No, Marcus. You know now. There is a difference." He pressed his hands against the back of the chair. "Let me do the test." "No." "Why?" "Because Theo is not your evidence." His eyes filled. "He deserves to know who his father is." Isabel's face changed then. For the first time, pain broke through the calm. He deserved that before he was born. Marcus could not speak. He deserved a father who waited. A father who asked questions before making accusations. A father who did not let his mother turn fear into exile. He deserved a man who understood that a child is not something you reject until science makes him convenient. Marcus whispered, "I was wrong. Yes, I was ashamed. Yes, I was scared. Yes, I have regretted it. I believe you." Hope rose in him before he could stop it. Then Isabel continued, "But regret is not a key." He closed his eyes. "Please. My son is not a document you get to file when guilt becomes unbearable." The sentence cut through him. "I'm not asking to take him. You are asking to legalize what you refuse to love." Marcus looked at her, broken open. "When Theo is old enough to decide what he wants written down, that choice will be his," Isabel said. "Not yours, not mine, his." Marcus covered his mouth with one hand. For the first time, he understood the difference between being denied and being too late. "I don't know how to live with this," he whispered. Isabel's voice softened, and somehow that hurt more. "You should have thought about that before making me live with it alone." For a long moment, neither moved. Rain traced the glass behind her. Finally, Marcus said, "Does he know?" "Enough." "Does he know who I am?" "He knows you are the man who didn't believe me." Marcus bowed his head. "Can I meet him?" Isabel's answer did not come quickly. When it did, it came with rules. One conversation, no promises, no gifts, No touching him unless he offers. No calling yourself his father. No mention of tests, names, inheritance, or the Calder family. You do not ask him for forgiveness. You do not cry so loudly that he feels responsible for comforting you. Marcus nodded, tears sliding down his face despite his effort to stop them. And Marcus? He looked at her. If he asks to leave, you let him. Yes. Theo was in the family lounge, building a paper airplane from a hospital brochure when they entered. He looked up. His eyes went first to Isabel. She nodded once. Only then did he look at Marcus. Up close, the resemblance was unbearable. Theo had Isabel's mouth and Lionel's stillness, but the rest was a mirror Marcus did not deserve. Marcus sat in the chair across from him, careful to keep distance. Theo folded one wing of the paper airplane. Are you the man who didn't believe my mom? Marcus felt the question go through him. Yes. Theo looked at his mother. Isabel's face remained calm, but her hand tightened slightly around the strap of her bag. Theo looked back. And now you believe her? Marcus swallowed. More than I believed myself. Theo considered that. That's good. Marcus almost breathed. Then Theo added, but it's late. The words were not cruel. They were worse. They were simple. Marcus nodded because there was nothing else to do. Yes, he said. It is. Theo looked at the hospital bracelet still around his wrist. Do you know about my blood? Yes. Grandpa says mine is complicated. Marcus glanced at Isabel. Your grandfather is right. My Wrenfield grandpa. Yes, Marcus said quietly. Your Wrenfield grandfather. Theo studied him. Do you have complicated blood too? No. My father does. So your dad. Yes. Theo's eyes sharpened in a way that was painfully familiar. So that's why you think you know? Marcus could not answer quickly. Yes, he said at last. Partly. Theo set the paper airplane down. My mom says knowing is not the same as staying. Marcus felt something collapse inside him. She's right. Did you leave because you thought I wasn't yours? Yes. And now that you think I am? Marcus's throat closed. Theo waited. Children, Marcus realized, could be merciless without intending to be. They simply asked the question adults spent years decorating. Marcus said, now I know I was wrong. Theo nodded slowly. But that doesn't make you my dad. No, Marcus said, barely audible. It doesn't. Theo picked up the paper airplane again. My mom stayed. Marcus looked at Isabel. She did. My grandpa stayed. Yes. The nurses stayed when I was sick. Marcus's eyes burned. Yes. Theo looked at him then, not angry, not soft, just honest. You knowing now doesn't change who stayed then. Marcus pressed a hand over his mouth, but he did not sob. Isabel's rule held him together. You're right, he said. Theo stood and walked to Isabel. Can we go home? Isabel put a hand on his shoulder. Yes. Theo paused before leaving. He looked back at Marcus. I hope your dad gets better. Marcus stared at him. Thank you. Theo nodded once. Then he left with his mother. And Marcus remained seated in the family lounge. Across from a paper airplane Theo had forgotten on the table. He did not touch it. He did not have the right. Edwin improved over the next few days. Not quickly, not completely, but enough for the doctors to call it hopeful. Wrenfield's protocol stabilized what other hospitals might have lost. Edwin understood that. So did Marjorie, though gratitude sat badly on her. Before he was discharged from intensive care, Edwin asked to see Isabel. She came to his room alone. I should have stopped it, he said. That night. Marcus. Marjorie. All of it. Isabel stood by the window. Yes. You should have. He closed his eyes. I would like to contribute to the Pediatric Blood Disorder Fund. Anonymous. Unrestricted. Through the foundation board. Isabel said. If it helps children, it can stay. If it helps your family rewrite history, it goes back. Edwin nodded. Fair. No, Isabel said. Fair would have been my child never needing your family's regret to arrive 10 years late. Edwin's eyes filled. You are very much your father's daughter. For the first time, Isabel almost smiled. No, she said. I am finally my own. That evening, Lionel found Isabel in the hospital garden, watching Theo through the glass. Do you think I did the right thing? She asked. Lionel looked at his grandson, then back at her. You refused because Theo is not a bridge Marcus gets to build out of guilt. Isabel exhaled. Part of me wonders if he'll question me one day. He might, Lionel said. But one day, he'll also know you protected his right to choose. Isabel watched Theo laugh at something the nurse said. Lionel stood beside her in silence for a moment. Then he said, "You came home broken." Isabel shook her head. "No." Her voice was quiet. "I came home unfinished." Lionel's eyes softened. "Yes," he said, "you did." Later, near the front entrance, Marcus stood under the covered drive. He had been discharged from crisis but not from consequence. His father was alive. His mother was silent. The truth was no longer avoidable. He held an umbrella in one hand. 10 years earlier, he had let Isabel walk into rain alone. Now, when Isabel and Theo approached the exit, Marcus instinctively stepped forward. Then he stopped. Theo saw the umbrella. Then he looked at Isabel. Isabel looked at Marcus. For a moment, the past stood between them, soaked and shivering. Marcus said quietly, "May I walk you out?" Theo's hand found Isabel's. She did not answer right away. Then she said, "No." Marcus nodded as if he had expected it, though the word still struck. Isabel's voice was not unkind. "You can know who he is, Marcus, but knowing him will be his choice, not your reward." Theo looked up at her, then at Marcus. He did not wave, but he did not look away either. That was all Marcus received, and more than he deserved. Isabel opened her own umbrella. Theo stepped beneath it with her. Together, mother and son walked into the soft rain. Marcus remained under the hospital awning, holding an umbrella no one had asked for. Edwin's blood disease had given him the truth. But truth was not the same as forgiveness. Truth was not the same as fatherhood. Truth was not a door, not after Marcus had spent 10 years bricking it shut from the other side. By the time Marcus knew Theo was his son, Isabel had already built a life where Marcus's name was no longer needed to make the boy whole. And sometimes, the final revenge is not watching someone lose everything. Sometimes, it is letting them see exactly what they lost, and making them understand they no longer have the right to call it theirs. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world tonight, tell me where you are. And tell me honestly, if someone abandoned your child before he was even born, would you ever let him come back just because he finally knew the truth? I read those comments more carefully than you know.